Today on Locked On Rockies, the GM, Bill Schmidt, says the roster is set. Well, at least the moves to make the roster are set, according to a report of Patrick Saunders. And some people aren't very happy about this. Did the Rockies do enough in the offseason this year?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 26th day of January in the year 2023. I am your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are proud to be part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You are in the right spot, because that's what we do around here, is talk about the Colorado Rockies each and every single day. You can find us free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. You can also find us on YouTube, where you can be part of the show. You can actually get the show first if you listen to it on YouTube. We record it live on our YouTube channel. It's posted first to the YouTube channel, even before the audio feeds get it. So if you want to get the Locked On Rockies podcast first, you got to go over to Locked On Rockies and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Today's episode of Locked On Rockies is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook is the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn, today to get started. Today on the Locked On Rockies podcast, we're going to talk roster. We are going to talk the criticism. People, when they heard, and when the mainstream, I don't know about mainstream, but when some of these baseball blogs picked up the news that the Rockies were done, they were kind of saying, like, what are we doing? Why are the Rockies not doing? Why the Rockies need to be competitive? They need to be doing this. They need to go all in. They need to do this thing. They need to, you're not going to fix it unless you do unless you're going and making some bigger moves and spending more money. And we ourselves have been proponents of that mindset. But are they really on the right track? And are people really right to believe that the Rockies are going to be as bad as they think they are? It's kind of been the theme of this offseason. And now that this report has come out to Patrick Saunders, and so now we can safely say, when you look at the moves and when you look at the roster right now of the Rockies, this is going to be it. There's going to be some fights for spring. I think there was a report saying, I saw two right there in the Post or something quickly. Maybe, let me see. I'm on the Denver Post right here. I don't know if I see it. It might not have been in the Post, but might have been. I think I saw something quick, just a headline or something. I didn't dive into it, that Schmidt was saying that Peter Lambert might be available for spring. There are multitudes of options and with the roster. And, well, yes, you look at this roster, and it's not flashy. It's not exciting. But is it worst in baseball, 100 losses? No. We continue to see people that are overreacting and freaking out to the Rockies not making moves. But we need to understand right now that the Rockies being active and going after these minor league guys, moving away from some veteran utility players and trying something else, these are the right moves for the Rockies. The window is closed right now. The time for the Rockies to fall or to follow this mindset that people like Fansided here or Starting Nine want for the Rockies this year, that's not necessarily really going to work for the Rockies in this situation. Doing it, unless the Rockies were truly able to go out and land some of the biggest name free agents in this class, the best thing the Rockies can do is open the door for this wave of prospects. This is how you get the next moment where you're sitting there and you're saying, how the heck are all these players all on the same team? And how the heck are they all on the Rockies? How does Nolan Arenado, DJ LeMahieu, Trevor Story all end up in the same infield with Charlie Blackmon in his prime out there playing in right field? It's because they made trades, or when they made moves, or they drafted these players, and then they opened the door for these players to play. And it takes seasons that aren't great to do so. In reality, it was more confusing for the Rockies to sign Chris Bryant last season than to chastise them and to yell at them or be upset for the Rockies' moves this offseason. Now, this offseason, yes, of course, again, there are mistakes. I think the Rockies missed out on a prime left-handed hitting center field bat. That is an absolute statement of fact, 110%. But we learned how hard it is to attract that talent into Colorado. We learned that the players looking for the one-year deal aren't necessarily going to benefit too much from a bounce-back year with Colorado. And we learned that they might think Zach Veen is going to be here sooner rather than later and might play center field. So for the Rockies to not go out and spend a ton of big money and sign big contracts and do all sorts of stuff, this is the right type of mindset for the Rockies to have this offseason, and to just sit there and burn them to the ground is a little misguided, even, and that's coming from me. And if you listen to this show, I am a very vocal critic of this offseason, but these moves and making the smaller moves and moving on from the players that they've moved on from makes sense given the current makeup of the Colorado Rockies and given the current makeup of not only the National League West, but Major League Baseball as well. See lots of people in the live chat. We're going to talk to the live chat here in just a second. We're going to dive into more about why the Rockies are kind of, the view of them is misguided in the fact and read from what some of the people are saying about the Rockies and how it's still the Rockies' fault, kind of, and how they still are part to blame for this. We'll get to that here in segment number 2. But before we do that, got to tell you about our brand new partners, our new friends here at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really, really, really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the number one sports book in America, folks. It is FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. Great time to go and head to FanDuel. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has you covered for all your money line, your point spreads, your player props, and folks, they got all sorts of stuff covered for you. With the action going on this weekend, it's football time, playoff football time. You can see all the stuff going on at FanDuel right now. Curious what's going on. The spread between the Niners and the Eagles, it's currently plus 2.5 for the Niners, and the Bengals and the Chiefs, they're right at 1. That one's going to be a bit of a toss-up. You can see all the lines they have available for you at the official sports betting partner of the NFL. That is FanDuel. Don't miss out on $150 in free bets, win or lose, with your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On Yankees is in the chat. Why don't you make Locked On Yankees your second listen of the day? Breaking down things, all things Yankees. Stacey, you might not want to listen to me kind of roasting Aaron, not roasting Aaron Judge, but being a little mean about the home run chase in yesterday's episode when I was all fired up. Also in the live chat, where you can be and you can catch all the episodes when you find the Locked On Rockies podcast on YouTube. Joel DeGrace, Nicholas Delvo are here, and so is Eric Harper. And Joel DeGrace comes at us with a hot take. Veen is going to make the opening day roster. Wow. That has to be one heck of a spring, I think. I think that that would be That would be insane. And it would be really interesting to see what the Rockies would want to do with him. And if Veen ends up making the roster, do all of the core 4 prospects make the roster? Because I'm gonna go ahead and sit here and say Tovar and Montero are locks for the Rockies roster this year going out. Can Tolia maybe spend some time in AAA? It might happen with CJ Cron, with trying to figure out that could happen, as well as Sean Bouchard. That's going to be interesting, because if Veen makes it, what does that mean for those 4 prospects? And what does that mean for Randall Grichuk? That would be a really interesting dynamic there. And the Rockies would have to have a ton of confidence in Zach Veen. I got Zach Veen coming up closer to the All-Star game. Or if he starts out hot, if he just keeps dominating and someone is a little shaken up, a little banged up, gets a little early injury, up pretty fast. And if he comes up and he succeeds, he might not go back down. It could be a very, very interesting factor. Nicholas Delvo says, I think we have a decent team. I think they just need work. It's probably not really a bad way to look at it. I mean, folks, with Rockies rosters in the past and with this Rockies roster, we know what we're going to get. Will the Rockies most likely flirt with 100 losses next year? Absolutely. I think that's if you see that over-under set at 69 and a half wins, that might be a little tough. I still sit here firmly believing the Rockies are a low 70 win team next year. I'm not as confident as Eric Harper here, who's saying 85 wins, but this is still not a team that I think is as much of a nightmare and as bad and has as many missing pieces as some of these other teams. To see the Rockies being compared to some of these other teams is kind of crazy. When you look consistently, yes, the Rockies have finished in the bottom of baseball, but the Rockies have avoided being the worst team in baseball multiple times, and the Rockies have always avoided 100 losses. But some people just see the Rockies and they just see anything that is that them not going all in or them not trying to be fully committing to win is a mistake right now. That type of criticism made sense in 18 and 19. The inaction of the Rockies and moving on, and then up until last season, bringing on Chris Bryant, all of those moves don't make sense when you think about how things were building and how you wanted to get back and closer to the playoffs or, to a World Series or the division title. You had all-stars, you had great players, you had successful pitching. Why are you not going after and making deals and beefing up these areas that you know are bad? You needed more power, you needed more offense in some areas, you needed better utility play around those players. Why didn't they do anything then? And why did you sign Chris Bryant to this crazy long committing deal after trading Nolan Arenado? Those are all, so, that all makes sense to be like, what is the point? What is the purpose? But to sit there and look at the Rockies offseason this year, knowing that they have a ton of prospects that they're really interested in and really high on, and some contracts that are going end and some aging veterans, this is the exact type of offseason the Rockies should have had. And this is the type of offseason that makes sense for a team in this position. The Rockies should have been sellers the Rockies would be in a better position to do things and go more into that buying in and going after some of these contracts. But that's not the right move when they didn't emphasize and capitalize on moving on from the players that are no longer with the team. So now, instead of getting yourself locked into a bunch of big contracts or a bunch of or a one-year deal that might block some of your prospects, the Rockies are going out and saying, we have a wave of young guys, and we're going to let the young guys play, and we're going to hope that a healthy Chris Bryant and our healthy veterans are going to be enough to keep us in the mix of things. And with some of the players that the Rockies have, that's not a bad idea. That's not a bad take. A reminder, teams still have to come to Coors Field. All the teams now. The Rockies are also playing a completely different schedule. The Rockies aren't just going to be the punching bag of the Dodgers and the Giants for a significant part of the season. Will that happen? Can they still get bodied by both of those teams? And will it still impact their record? And do they still play their division a lot? Yes, absolutely. but you're not looking at the last month of the season being basically in California the whole time. You're not looking at very many stretches where the Rockies are just playing the NL West for the entire month. That is going to be a big factor for these Rockies. Let's read some of the, what David Hill has to say here from calltothepen.com. Colorado Rockies owner Dick Monfort claims that the team's inability to reach the postseason since 2018 is not good enough. His actions indicate otherwise. I would agree with that. On Friday, Patrick Saunders of the Denver Post reported that the Rockies are likely done putting their roster together, while general manager Bill Schmidt did indicate that they will be looking for depth pieces in pitching. The Rockies are essentially done with the offseason. Next thing, the Colorado Rockies continue living in land of delusion. The Rockies' big move this offseason, they signed Jose Urena and Pierce Johnson, the latter replacement for Carlos Estevez. Connor Siebold and Nolan Jones were brought in via trade. Brent Suter was a waiver acquisition, and the Rockies signed several players to minor league contract, the most notable of which would be Harold Castro. That's it. And it is not nearly good enough. The rest of the division has improved, or the very worst stayed the same. One could even argue that the Rockies took a step backwards this offseason as they failed to land anyone that could be considered an upgrade to their roster. Those signings and trades do not tell the full story. The Rockies are going to be counting on prospects such as Ezequiel Tovar, Zach Veen, and Drew Romo to make an impact in the near future. There's also a great deal of pressure to put on those younger players to count on them to be the difference makers in a difficult NL West. It also speaks volumes to the level of delusion that remains in Colorado. The Rockies feel that they have a contending team despite the evidence of the past few years. They've generally sat out free agency or the trade deadline because they feel they have a good enough roster and are still in contention. The reality is that they are only deluding themselves. That makes, that is a fair, that's fair, because again, they have said that, they have been on the forefront of that, and they have followed through with that, and that mindset has cost them greatly for the Rockies. Their ignorance and their inability to put together a team and bounce back or make moves or do not, all of that is valid. But again, they only name the prospects that are coming, and two of the prospects they name are still in the process of the minors and most likely won't be spending a lot of time with the team. I don't expect Drew Romo with the Rockies. If Drew Romo tears through and he's ready early, I suppose, I don't expect Drew Romo before August. That article negates the fact that the Rockies are looking to find starting positions for 4 prospects next year. It negates to mention that the fact that the Rockies are hoping for a bounce back from Chris Bryant. It's not delusional as much anymore. The delusion was more the other off seasons. This quieter off season of minor league moves, smaller moves, depth, and going for veterans in your pitching staff makes sense because, folks, the Rockies aren't going to compete, and they weren't going to compete. It doesn't matter unless they were going to be able to spend all the money that they had that you could possibly imagine and get 4 of the big name MLB people and completely drastically alter and crazily change the landscape and history of the Rockies. Are they going to compete with the Dodgers and the Padres? Be realistic. It's okay in the big picture of things in Rockies fandom because it's a long haul of few high peaks and a lot of lows. But to get back to those peaks, you kind of got to go through this. And this is the type of the offseason where you feel the Rockies have skipped out off the bottom. And the bottom being inactivity at the trade deadline of the 2022 season. I think that's as low as the Rockies have gotten, again, going through where they had opportunities to move on from players and to fully embrace this going with prospects model and mindset. And they didn't do anything. But now, one single move that this offseason for the Rockies, you can sit there and criticize, like the Chris Bryant deal. You can't. You can be upset the Rockies traded Connor Joe. That's kind of it. And you can be upset that the Rockies weren't able to bring in a slugger outfielder. I think those are the two. Those are some valid things. But again, Connor Joe didn't have a spot on the roster. He lost it in the season. We all saw it. It is something to consider when you're thinking about with the Rockies, because guess what? These low-risk moves, if they all pan out, then you have them there. You have the foundation, their prospects, they're more manageable deals. And Eric, that's a good point. Brendan Rodgers' no extension is a disappointment. That one's worrisome. But at least the things you can sit there and say, you can't really be all that mad at these moves if you truly understand the current state of the Rockies. Like, I really, looking at this offseason, for the Rockies to be in an immediate contention spot with the top teams in their division, the Rockies would have had to spend more money than probably any team in baseball history and signed players that they never had a chance of getting. So let the kids play. See what you have in your top-rated prospects. Add this veteran depth and some interesting things. Use the waiver wire to build up and add to the bullpen depth. And you just kind of got to roll with it this year. And Eric, you add another point here. I think we're in for a fun year. I can't wait. There's part of me that is more excited for this season now because of this. Going into the season last year, the Chris Bryant thing and a little bit of my hype, I was like, there was some energy, but it's kind of a different focus this year. There's a lot of new Rockies, guys, gals, non-binary pals. There are a lot of new faces on this team. And there are a lot of people looking to prove it. There are a lot of people looking to bounce back. There are a lot of people that might benefit from the change in scenery. There's a lot of things to watch. But yes, the Rockies can, I mean, if you really want to, you can call them delusional, because it is right. The one thing the Rockies can't sit there and do and tell us this year is that they think that they're competitive right now. That right here, right now, this team as constructed can go the distance, because that's just lying to us, as they've lied to us with some of these rosters in the past, and what's given them this reputation of delusion. Why does everyone think the Rockies are delusional? Well, because they've had a pretty long history of being delusional. Now, it makes the moves just make more sense right now. Because eventually, it's going to catch up with these teams. The Dodgers will always have the money. The Padres have an interesting owner, but every team goes through cycles. It happens. Some team cycles and their low cycles aren't as bad as other team cycles. But right now, if the Rockies can start trending up while other teams start trending down, that's good news. That's good news for the Rockies. Let's dive into the live chat here. Joel DeGray says, second hot take, we'll get a surprise one-hit complete game out of nowhere from Freeland. Love it. I think you should always keep Rockies pictures in the back of your mind for that no-no. Just because, there's only been one. They got more frequent. Who knows? But I think the no-hitter is going to get harder again now. I mean, there's going to be some people that might, I wonder if people are going to question some of these no-hitters that were thrown in the shift era. Are we going to hear more? Are we going to hear about accolades and defensive things and no-hitters and such in the shift era, the dead ball era? It'll be interesting. I think a special year for Freeland could be a nice possibility. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Eric, we're going to get you believing in German Marquez. We've seen it. We've seen it. Let's see it again. And again, another thing too that people haven't thought about, the Rockies did bring in at least one new coach with the hitting coach. They did mix things up there. There's a lot of stuff to be intrigued by in the right quantity, because this is still also a team that isn't going to be great. Isn't going to be overwhelmingly good. But could be some interesting, could lead to some interesting news here. But if you just scroll on Twitter here and you just type Bill Schmidt, there's MLB deadline news with a little Moneyball meme. Billy, this is Colorado Rockies GM Bill Schmidt. He recently said the Rockies are done making moves this offseason. The only problem is that the Rockies lost 94 games in 2022 and have literally made 0 productive moves this offseason. That's not true. I think the Rockies trades this offseason are the right type of trades the Rockies make. I think going out and getting Suter from the Brewers is a productive move. To say the Rockies have done no moves of impact isn't true. They just haven't done flashy moves. They haven't done big moves. They haven't done moves that people immediately will sit there and say, yes, the one Rockies game, the 6 innings of the Rockies game that I watched at the bar, and then when I read about the Rockies on the internet, because let's be real, folks, these people don't watch the Rockies. We talked about it earlier. We've talked about it this week. We see it all the time. We, as Rockies fans, we in the region and real people who follow the game and look into the Rockies, watch the Rockies. A lot of people have a lot of takes about the Rockies, and they don't watch the Rockies. I got in a little spat with some people on my Mario Baseball Discord. A guy called Todd Helton mediocre, and it's like, that's just lazy. That's a lazy take. Some of these, but again, you can't sit here and fault people and blame people for being upset at the Rockies front office, because the Rockies front office has definitely been has earned the ire. Let's see also here on Twitter. Yeah, not much there. And anyway, again, I feel like part of me, this is the most pro front office I've been in a while. I'm just giving the small amount of props and giving a little bit of clarity where clarity is due. Which batter do you think will benefit the most from the new shift rules? Asked Joel DeGrace. It's hard to tell. I really want to hope it's Randall Grichuk because he's hitting the ball in the air more and not right at people and grounding out. Chuck will benefit, yeah, I think as well. I think everyone's going to benefit. You're going to be able to hit the ball through the gap through to infielders again. Hard hit ground balls are going to go through. The ground balls aren't going to be as deadly to the Rockies anymore because they're not going to just go straight to someone. It's a good question, though. I'm going to have to think more about that. Anyway, folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. You can find us free and streaming on your favorite streaming service. Just search Locked On Rockies, and you can also find us on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockies on YouTube, so you can be part of the live chat, just like Eric, just like Joel, just like Nicholas. All were today Locked On Yankees as well. Shout outs to our friend at Locked On Yankees. And folks, you can find us free and streaming, favorite platform, all that good stuff where you can find us all offseason, all season long here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Why don't you go make the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast your second listen of the day? Lindsey Crosby keeping you up to date with all things prospects. You can also stay up to date with Colorado sports with the Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Broncos, and Locked On Nuggets podcasts. And folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.